Okay, well, I'm really excited about today's guest. He's the author of over 30 books.
Wow.
I mean, he's written more books than I've read.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, fantastic. But an advisor to two presidents, Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. So advisor to the White House, the whole thing, Washington insider. And so please welcome to the show, Mr. Doug Wead. Good to see you, Doug.
Welcome, Doug.
Hey, hi, Steve. Hi, Tom.
Great to see you. And we got some of your books here we're going to talk about. So I got to tell you, open up with this story. So,
Okay.
so I don't know if you remember this, Doug, but September, so almost 20 years ago to the day, September 10th, 2001,
Right.
the day before the world
I
changed.
remember, yeah.
I'm sitting in a Mexican restaurant in Scottsdale, Arizona with Doug Wead and our friend Don Stewart. You remember that, Doug?
Yeah.
20 years ago,
Yeah.
almost, right?
Wow.
So we were talking about that. Doug started the National Charity Awards with, what was it President Reagan you started it with, Doug?
Well, the first one was actually with Jimmy Carter and Rosalind
Jimmy
Carter.
Okay. And then Reagan
then
picked it up and...
Yes, the idea started at the Reagan's dinner table, but the first actual event was with the Carters.
Okay. So Doug invited me to be on the board of the National Charity Awards. And
Wow.
so then he called maybe another month later and he said, okay, now it's changed because September 11th happened. And then we did the whole thing in Washington and donated all the money to the September 11th fund, wasn't it, Doug? The fire fund? Or
Yeah, firemen. And
And Doug got me on,
it was quite a deal.
one of the best things Doug did for me, he got me on the same panel or board with Cheryl Ladd from Charlie's Angels. So
Wow.
thanks for that, Doug.
Can't beat that.
She was very cute.
I bet
but
she
this
was.
tall, you know?
Yeah.
So we appreciate you being on, Doug. You know, let's talk first of all. I went through, I know you've written so many books. Now, your latest book is this one, Inside the Trump White House.
Yeah.
And this has been a big seller for you, right?
Yeah, big seller. I got $1 million advance on it. It's the official authorized history of the Trump White House.
Wow.
And while there's so many books that have sources that aren't on the record, and this book has them all on the record. So it's got Donald Trump, who sat down for interviews, and Jared and Ivanka and Tiffany and Donnie and Eric and Laura and all of them. And it's just absolutely fascinating bird's eye view inside the White House.
And you actually did some of the interviews in the Oval Office, from what I read.
Yeah, a number of them were in the Oval Office and at Jared and Ivanka's home in Georgetown and all over the place. Trump Tower in New York City, wherever they were, I followed them around and got the story. They're fascinating stories and very funny. Soon after he became president, it was very hard on Melania, you know. So the president would tease her. They'd sit down to dinner with the family at dinner table, and Donald Trump would say, "Melania, honey, aren't you glad I got elected president of the United States? So now you can be first lady. You'd have never had any of all of this without me." And of course, she, who's chafing under all this terrible criticism that she constantly got, said, "Oh yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot."
I'll bet.
I bet she did.
Well, what was it like being in the middle of all that craziness, kind of firestorm with Trump? It's sort of as an insider. I mean, very few people have that kind of position. What was it like being in the middle of all that?
It was fascinating to me because it was just the opposite of what the national media was reporting. So I just couldn't get over that. I just captured everything I could. But I thought going in, Steve, I'd worked in the White House, and I knew that what we did in the White House was far more calculated than the national media or political observers ever would have dreamed. So I suspected it must be that way for the Trump White House, too, because it looked so chaotic and haphazard. And when I got in there, I soon learned that's exactly the case. There was a real genius behind the chaos. I think it was Sun Tzu. He's incorrectly attributed the quote that out of chaos comes opportunity, but that was certainly the case with Trump. He'd blow up NATO, then he'd rebuild it bigger than ever and raise $100 billion for it. He'd blow up NAFTA, and he'd rebuild a better treaty that was much more durable. And that was typical of Donald Trump.
Wow.
Well, having met all these presidents and worked with them like you have, What would you say is the main difference between somebody who was a career politician that got elected president of the United States and somebody who was a business leader that got elected president? What was the difference?
Well, money, the understanding and knowledge of money for Trump is just striking. A good example is the Afghan crisis unfolding. Under Jimmy Carter, we had 52 hostages. It really wasn't Carter's fault. It happened on his watch, and he's criticized for not having a strong enough military to do something about it. But he didn't cause that crisis. Right. But suddenly, to have thousands of Americans now behind enemy lines. What Trump did when he came into office, there were 55 Americans being held hostage in prisons all over the world. And some of them had been there for 2 presidencies, all through the Obama presidency and all through the George W. Bush presidency. And the way he got them out was money. He understands money. He understands that you need money. And a lot of politicians don't. They don't understand money. They just print more of it. He understood it. So he did that when he took on ISIS. He dried up their income from the artifacts from the antiquities. He knew they were selling them on the market. So he went after the bank accounts of some of the great collectors around the world, and he dried that up. He knew they were making money off oil. He outlawed that, dried up, went after the banks and held all of that money. ISIS soon had no money. Same happened with the dictators and nations that were holding Americans hostage. He took them to the brink financially, said, "You sure you want to do this?" And they finally gave up, said, "Okay, you can, we'll let him out of prison. You can have him," because Donald Trump knew how money works and how important it is. Lots of politicians don't.
Wow. Doug, with all the presidents you've known, and he's such a humble guy. You got to ask him. He won't tell us otherwise, probably. But of all the presidents you've worked with and known and have relationships with over the years, who would you say was the best leader of all of them?
Well, I know it's controversial. A lot of your viewers won't like it, but Donald Trump really is a leader. He doesn't follow behind. He stakes out his claim of what he wants to do. When he got into office, on the first day, he wanted to win ISIS. On the first day, he wanted to solve the Middle East problem. He just is gung-ho. And that's very impressive to me. He's not afraid to set the goals. He told me that when he sat down with Barack Obama after he was elected president, he asked Obama, then the president, Trump was the president-elect, said, "What's the biggest problem I'm going to face in my presidency?" And Obama said, "The biggest problem you're going to face is war with North Korea. There will be a war with North Korea on your watch. There's no way out of it." And Trump said, "Well, have you called him?" And Obama said, "No, I haven't called him. He's a dictator." And then Trump looked at me and the others. We were having lunch with him in the Oval Office. He said, "Did you get that?" "No, I didn't call him. He's a dictator." Stupid. This is what Trump was saying. So apparently Donald Trump is of the persuasion, if you got a problem with someone, you pick up the phone and you call them. You don't sit and let it unfold at its own pace. You resolve it. And I think that's leadership. Ronald Reagan struck me as a great leader. And there have been other great leaders among the Democrats, too.
Wow.
Well, one of the things I've learned is this is my 40th year of being a leader in business. And certainly not on a stage like an elected official, but in our business, it's been a big stage. And what I've learned is that when you attempt to be a leader, when you step out and you lead, when you innovate, when you disrupt, you invite criticism. And it seems to me, of course, I've followed Trump for many years. I've been following the books he wrote way back. And I feel like sometimes when he was trying to lead and trying to innovate and trying to disrupt like a normal business leader does, that caused him to be attacked. Not that different than when you're in business, but when you're attacked as a politician on a grand stage like that, it seems like it's everywhere you turn, every magazine, every book, every TV show. And so talk about that for a second. Did you get the same sense?
Well, it's very complex and it's ties to the economy. A lot of it's related to the international global economy. The name of the game, Tom and Steve, as you very well know, the name of the game is and always has been monopoly. The idea is that these big companies want a monopoly, and that means destroying their small business competitors that show up. And the way they destroy their small business competitors is through regulation. So they increase the regulations, which is a burden on them. But more importantly, it's a burden that the small business can't carry. So the small businesses are driven out of the market, and the monopolies who are wealthy, they can afford to implement these regulations. And then here's the trick. I learned this after 40 years of working with the Bushes and in government and at the White House. I never understood this. There'll be a recession. It may be a Republican, it may be a Democrat president, doesn't matter. There's a recession. And they go to the lobbyists in Washington and say, what can you do to create jobs? We need jobs. And these lobbyists, who all represent the monopolies, none of them represent little businesses, they represent the big monopolies. They say, well, you have all these regulations on us. If you'll give us like a 15-year hiatus, we care about the environment. We want strong regulations against a bad environment. But if you'll give us a 10-year hiatus on this, we can create 50,000 jobs or 100,000 jobs. So these big monopolies who had the regulations against them and used those regulations to drive their competitors out of business, they now are exempted from the very regulations themselves. They don't have to keep them either. So it's really quite a game. And here came Donald Trump. He unleashed these angels of small business, and suddenly a big company like Boeing that had no-bid contracts on many projects now had 40 competitors who were also bidding on some of those government projects. And that was really an amazing phenomenon. It worked for a while till with COVID, they shut down all the small business.
Right.
You know, with COVID, Costco didn't shut down. Walmart didn't shut down. None of the big corporations shut down. It was your neighborhood restaurant that was shut down.
Yeah, that's true. You know, before I want to point out some of these books to our viewers and our listeners here. All the President's Children. I think when I met you, Doug, you were working on this book. This is one of the ones. Phenomenal. Doug is a phenomenal writer. I mean, he's a phenomenal speaker, phenomenal writer. Of course, The Game of Thorns, the book about Hillary Clinton. I know this is one of your most popular books, right, Doug?
Yeah, it did very well.
Phenomenal book. And Doug, you'll love this. I dug back in the archives. You're going to love this. And I found one of your first books with Dexter Yeager, Becoming Rich. You see, I bought it from a thrift shop, Doug, at some point. And this is when you had dark hair and I had dark hair. I don't even see the picture on the back, but all his books are phenomenal. He's a great speaker.
Fantastic.
Great writer. Doug, I got to ask you this because, and you tell me if I'm wrong about the setup part of it, but as I understand it, I mean, you told me 25 years ago probably, you were intimately involved, let's say, in getting Reagan represent the liaison, I think you called it, between the religious community, if I'm saying it the right way, and Ronald Reagan, in an attempt to get him elected, is the way I remembered it. Is that true? Is that kind of the way it was set up, that you were part of that push for the religious community to vote for Reagan?
Well, I had a project involved. I wrote the Reagan campaign biography in 1979, and it came out in 1980, and it was the only book out on Reagan at the time. So that was geared towards conservatives, including social conservatives. And then George H.W. Bush had me co-author a book with him that was also designed for evangelicals and social conservatives. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
Okay, so here's my question for you. I know you've probably gotten this a bunch of times. So, like every other viewership and listenership, our people are probably split down the middle in terms of political affiliation. But the one thing, because I know you know the religious voting bloc probably as well as anybody in this country, how do you reconcile, and I know it's not the first time you've heard this question, but how do you reconcile the religious part of the equation when it comes to Donald Trump, who obviously is not, well, I won't even get into that, but we worked with Trump's organization for 15 years with the Miss USA pageant and whatnot. I never saw Trump as a real religious person in 15 years, but that is aside really. But my point is, with the religious community kind of backing Trump in a major way, how do they reconcile that with some of the things Trump has done and said and been accused of over all these years?
Yeah, well, they don't reconcile it, and they don't like they have much criticism for Trump, and they have criticism for all kinds of people. But we have a two-party system. Some people say we should be like Europe, we should have 12 parties, but really, all of the world it's a two-party system, because even if you're in a country that has 12 parties, it eventually siphons down and narrows down to two, and there's eventually a choice between the two. So it's not a question of who's the perfect candidate. Maybe the perfect candidate would be, I don't know, Joel Osteen or something for evangelicals, but the question is, of the two that were being offered, which one would be best for us and why? And that's usually what it has come down to with evangelicals.
I see. Okay.
And with every other group too, by the way.
So whatever policies that he's backing, they're going to go more toward the policies as opposed to the personality.
Yes, definitely, as opposed to the personality.
And they're able to leave the personality side out of it and the behavior and all that out of it, kind of.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, Donald Trump, he's not a diplomat, of course. He's not a politician, but he had just some raw business sense that immediately brought. I give you an example. He was at a meeting with the Pentagon on Afghanistan, and he was going over the line item budget. He saw a huge number, and he said, "What's this?" They said, "That's the Afghan army." That much? Yes, we have 200,000 members of the Afghan army, and we pay their salary every month. And wouldn't you rather have the Afghan army take the risks and instead of an American soldier be shot? And we can tell the Afghan army where to go and what to do. But that much money? What's their names? And the Pentagon generals were just stunned and confused. What's their names? Yeah, what's the names of these soldiers? They said, "Oh, okay, Mr. President, we'll run an audit for you, and we'll try to figure out where all this money's going." And they ran an audit, and the first pass through the audit, they found that 100,000 soldiers, almost half of the Afghan army, did not exist. They were fake names, and the money was going down a rat hole of corruption.
Wow.
That included Afghan and Americans and others benefiting from it. So that's typical Donald Trump. Give me their name. We're paying this money. Who are we paying it to? Tom and Steve? I want their names. And the audit showed big surprises. Only a businessman would think of that.
That's
a
right.
politician would think, don't bother me.
Interesting.